Toastmaster Ashok Kumar, scripting blockbuster stories. Toastmaster Ashok.
Thank you, Toastmaster. Morning.
Good morning.
What was the first movie that you watched after your marriage along with your spouse? Can you recall?
The story you want to forget.
That was a funny coincidence. But is that the real movie that you watched? Okay. For me, it was the movie called Meraki in 2007. So, for those who are not familiar with Tamil films, this was directed by one Mr. Radha Mohan. The film had a very simple story. Right? A boy meets a girl, and the boy likes the girl, but the girl doesn't like, and they both reconcile, and they get married and live happily thereafter. A simple story, right? In fact, there's no story inside this, right? But it was a blockbuster movie. Why?
Way of narration.
Screenplay. Narration, screenplay. The fact is, not all of us are Radha Mohans to pull off a blockbuster from a thin storyline. For the rest of us aspiring storytellers, we need a method to create that storytelling magic. So, in the next 20 minutes, right, we will unpack that method to tell great stories. Stories that will light up your Toastmaster speeches. Stories that will captivate your colleagues at work. Stories that will strengthen your bonds at home. I've structured this next 20 minutes into two parts. Part number one, we will talk about a technique of storytelling called the golden boat, the CPR golden boat technique of storytelling, which is used by famous Hollywood studios like the Pixar studios. So when you watch a Hollywood movie, it follows this structure called golden boat, or Hollywood, or just for the matter that any movie, it follows this structure called CPR golden boat structure. So in the first 10 minutes, we will talk about that CPR golden boat method of storytelling. The next 10 minutes is going to be activity time. I have a story for you, which I have printed it out. I will hand it over to you. We will read that story, and you have an exercise where you will identify the anatomy of the story, the elements of the story. And we will wrap up with a small brainstorming session, 1 or 2 minutes. And that is what is going to happen in the next 20 minutes. Imagine this. You are in a park, right? Someone falls unconscious. What is that emergency medical procedure that we do to revive that person? Just take a guess. CPR. It is called cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Like a CPR revives a person, this CPR golden boat technique brings life to the stories. Last week, I was flipping through the Netflix, right? It was around 9 p.m. in the evening. I thought, okay, 5 minutes, I'm going to just flip through some Netflix content, and then I'm hitting the bed at 9:05 or 9:10. What happened after that was interesting, right? I landed in one series called Curry and Cyanide in Netflix. Not sure how many of you have watched that. The poster was so attractive that I started that, and the 5 minute became 95 minutes. I ended up watching the whole series, right? It happened to most of us. The story was so gripping that I watched it for the entire 95 minutes. Now here is my question to you. What makes a story gripping?
No unwanted events, so only necessary things are packed.
Yeah. So what made my 5 minute into a 95 minute is the story opened with a conflict, which is the C of the CPR. C for conflict. And here is the hack, right? When you start a story, put that gripping conflict in the front. When you put a gripping conflict in the front, it captivates the audience. The audience wants to know more. When you start a story with a gripping conflict, the audience wants to know more, and then they continue traveling with you throughout the speech. So, C, conflict, is the bridge between you and the audience. The greater the conflict, better is the reception for your story. Now coming to the elements of a conflict. Now we know conflict is great, it builds great stories, it builds a foundation for great stories. What are the ingredients of a great conflict? That is my question to you. What are the ingredients of a great conflict? Characters, that is one of them. So this is what we call as the who of the conflict.
The theme, basic theme.
Yeah. So how do you build a great conflict, right? First, you tell the audience when does it happen, right? When you start telling a story, you should tell them when is it happening, what date, what time is it happening. So when is the first most important ingredient of a conflict, right? When you build a conflict. If you watch any movie, it starts with a flashback. There will be on the screen, it will say in 2005 the hero was here, there. Next is where of the conflict. Where is the story happening? That is more important. And the third is what of the conflict. Who of the conflict. Who. Especially many stories, great stories start with a great villain, right? If you are a fan of Blue Satai Maran, the one who reviews movies, right? He used to say the hero is made more braver when the villains are more graver, right? So because the graver the villain is, the valor of the hero is much more pronounced. So building a great conflict is about where, when, and who. So that is the first C of the CPR Golden Mode technique. Conflict. Open your story with a great conflict. Now let's take an example that we all are familiar with. You all have watched the 2024 title winning speech of World Championship Public Speaking, Luis Montalvo's speech called 37 Strangers. So here is my question to you, for those who have watched it. What is that one conflict she opens her speech with? Did any of you remember? Okay. Clear. An unresponsive female, no pulse. So the situation is, this is a speech called the 37 Strangers who are trying to revive Luis Montalvo. Again, this is CPR. They were trying to revive Luis Montalvo. So she set the stage through that great conflict. When she uttered that dialogue, clear, unresponsive female, no pulse, right? We all want to know why. Who is not having pulse? You know, what happened to her? And what are these 37 strangers doing to help her? So she has set that conflict right, and she has set that conflict up front. In the first 10 seconds of the speech itself, she has set that conflict, right? And the next 7 minutes, she is unpacking it, opening the conflict, right? Building on it. So that is the C of the CPR. So C, conflict of the CPR. Now moving on to the P of the CPR golden rule. The P stands for the progress. The progress of the speech, right? So there are two ways of doing the progress. One, you explain the conflict, or number two, you expand the conflict. When you explain the conflict, you tell more about the conflict. When you expand the conflict, you progress further, build more and more knots into the story, right? So this is the expand of the conflict. So let's take the Luis Montalvo story again. For those who haven't watched, don't worry, you can go back, it's there on YouTube, you can watch it. Search for Luis Montalvo or 37 stages, you will get it. So the progress, what are the two? Progress is happening through sub-stories, and each sub-story will have a message. What are the two stories that Luis Montalvo was using to, explain her conflict? Any guesses?
The ambulance is arriving and yeah.
Yeah, that is a conflict, sir. Two stories. Story number one is that drama that is happening at the entrance of the heaven, right? Peter, and there is a conversation happening, whether to admit her into the heaven or not. That is story number one. Story number two is at the rehab center, she meets a person without limbs, if he can be so cheerful with he doesn't have two legs, but he is gymming and he was cheerful. If he can be so cheerful, why can I not be? Right? So those are the two sub-stories that she will use to explain her conflict. Now coming to the R, which is the resolution, right? This is the most important thing that you will leave the audience with, which is like either it will be, one common way that we do in Toastmasters is we do a call to action, right? We tell the audience that you do this, you will get better, right? The other way, novel way that Luis Montalvo did is using props. What was the prop that she was using? And it nicely ties up with the opening, right? She shows two petals that we use to do the CPR. CPR, if you look at hospitals, they use a petal to pump up the chest, right? The electric petal. So she uses the petal, which is a prop. So the prop is a novel way that I have seen in the recent times of using the CPR, the resolution, right? To sum it up, any story, if it is built using the conflict, progress and resolution, CPR, it will have a great impact with the audience. Now coming to the next 10 minutes, right, the second part of our speech, which is, we'll take a story. I will read the story really quick. If you don't have time, don't worry. I will quickly run through the story for you. And here's your question, right? Out of the two kind of stories, right, personal and business stories, which is more common to find CPR? Either a personal story or a business story? Mostly it is business stories that are very difficult to find a CPR. So we will take the business story today, and I will quickly run through the story. And on the back of the, this is the story, which is a small business case. On the back of it, there is a CPR. You will fill the C, P and R of the story. Right, so that we recognize what the CPR of the story is. Then we'll go from there. Right. Thank you.
One more.
You need one more? Alright. So here is is a story, right? Very recent business story that I borrowed from the source called the Ken. The Ken is a business newsletter. So it's called Noodle Wars. One of the recent business news that happened last week is there is a change of guard in Nestle's Maggi brand, right? Nestle, there is a change of guard where the person who is in charge of Maggi is going to hand over the control to another person in 2025. And with that context, this story was written. Nestle's instant noodle brand Maggi has seen its ups and downs. Among Indians, it triggers nostalgia, fond memories of hot steaming comfort food and chilly hill station vacations. That's a powerful asset for any brand. But there is also a period that has left a bit of bad taste in the mouth and tainted its image. Now, if you can listen to me, in 2015, something happened to Maggi. Do you remember what happened to that brand? It was banned. It was banned for more than 6 months in 2015. What was the reason? They found the traces of lead in that. So that is what the next paragraph was talking about. About a decade ago, at the height of its market dominance, Maggi was embroiled in an adulteration scandal. It was even banned for half of the year in 2015. A routine check by Uttar Pradesh government and a few more checks, led the lead traces of was found in Maggi. At that time, Nestle's best-known product was Maggi with a 63% share. So, among all Nestle's product, Maggi had a 63% share of India's noodle market. Right? There are other noodle brands too in India. Being banned for lead contamination is not a good look on any food brand, and crafting a comeback is probably challenging. That is when the new managing director Suresh Narayanan was brought in. So he was flew in from Philippines. He was managing a business unit in Philippines. So he was brought in to recover the brand, Maggi brand. And in August 2015, he took the reins of the company. By June 2016, Maggi was back on shelves and it has regained 70% of the market share. It has lost 57% compared to zero a year back. In the decade, what he means is the decade from 2015 to 2024, Narayanan took over. Nestle leads India sales. Nestle's India sales grew 150% and profits by 78%. So earlier in the month, in October 2024, the company announced that Narayanan would be retiring as chairman and managing director next year. In July 2025 would be Manish Tiwari. So Maggi is in a far better position now because they have regained the master share. But that doesn't mean the new leadership won't have any challenges. Right? There are a fair set of challenges for the new leader as well. Neither healthy nor trendy, Maggi's biggest challenge have to do with instant noodle segment itself. Is now perceived being associated more with taste and flavor than health. Because of late India has become more health conscious, as we all know, right? So in India, the size of this market is expected to grow from 1.88 billion to 3.83. So there are two challenges Maggi is going to face. One, the newfound health consciousness of the Indians, right? And number two, the competition from other brands. So there are other brands like ITC's Ippy is there, and there is one more Nepal brand, Wawa noodles, that is coming up. So this is a second challenge that is in front of Manish Tiwari. So it says noodle wars, the instant noodle space is hotting up. Maggi may still be the market leader in India, but if it wants to preserve its crown for longer, it needs to reinvent its story for new customers and a new market. Now, coming to the CPR, right? There are many ways in which you can put this, right? There is no one right way. There could be many ways. For example, conflict. Feel free to just put in your thoughts. What could be the conflict in this story? If you want to redo this story, what could be a different conflict? Right? And what are the two sub-stories that you want to talk about? And what is the resolution, or what is the takeaway from this? If you want to take 2 minutes, right, and then we can quickly do a discussion. How are we doing on time? 19 minutes. Yeah, we'll wrap up in two more minutes. All right, ready? Okay, maybe we'll take one or two volunteers. How will you place the conflict for this story? What is the conflict that you want to start with?
Downfall in the market share.
Okay, you want to start with downfall in the market share in 2015. So which means your conflict, you will set the time of the conflict as 2015, and you will talk about how the market share fell from 63% to 0%,
Yes.
right? Okay. And then you,
Why it happened
okay.
and blow it up a
We'll
bit.
start with Maggie has a high content of lead.
High content of the lead, okay. Which means you will do a build up saying, such a worst product, how can people consume it, all that. Okay, great.
Conflict.
Okay. How will you build a progress? Anyone want to take a stab at it? How will you build a progress for this story?
The new leader Narayan.
New leader Narayan coming like a hero to save the brand, right? Okay. Great. Okay. Any other sub story that you can?
Can we do the story with the Manish Tiwari?
Manish Tiwari. What daunting challenge Manish Tiwari has in front of him? Okay. How will you resolve this? Or resolve this, or not every story will need to have a resolution. There could be some stories where you will leave the audience to do the thinking also.
The last line, the same thing. So
Ah.
we don't know
We don't
how
know.
this is going to turn out.
Ah.
Unhealthy to healthy. What's a new story they may come out with? So it's an open question.
Open question. Yeah, you will.
More
you will-
competition is good for the
Here is health in a pack.
Yeah, because all the competitor brands are starting to focus on, ragi noodles and all these healthy options, right? Yeah, okay, great. So that's a wonderful exercise that we did in the very short time available. But business stories always, if they are built in this, right? In your workplace, if you want to tell a story, you follow this structure and it'll do the magic for you. Like the movie Moli had sign language. The hero used to learn sign language to communicate with her loved one. Any of you watched the movie? He learned sign language to communicate with her loved one. Likewise, you learn this language of CPR, and you can tell stories that will light up the audience in Toastmasters, stories that will captivate your colleagues at work, and stories that will create magic for you. With that, I hand over the control back to the Toastmaster.
That was very informational speech by Ashok. So he gave us all CPR, and he started with Mori and ended with Mori. So that was really good. Thanks Ashok for the speech. And after